Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment purposes. What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors faces off against a morning show host who thinks he can push anyone around? You're about to witness the moment Keanu Reeves had enough of Craig Melvin's disrespectful tactics and delivered a response that left the entire studio speechless. This confrontation started as a simple interview promotion, but escalated into something nobody saw coming. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about live television drama. The morning started like any other at the Today Show studio. Keanu Reeves had arrived early, as was his custom, prepared to discuss his latest film project. He sat in the green tin area, quietly reviewing his talking points while sipping coffee from a simple paper cup. The makeup team had finished their work, and Keanu appeared relaxed, even offering genuine smiles to the crew members who approached him for quick conversations. Craig Melvin walked onto the set with his usual swagger, clipboard in hand, and an air of authority that filled the room. He barely acknowledged Keanu's presence, instead focusing on his notes and barking orders at the production assistants. The contrast between the two men was immediately apparent to everyone watching from the sidelines. 30 seconds to air, called out the floor director. Craig settled into his chair across from Keanu, finally making eye contact. All right, Keanu, this should be straightforward. I've got some questions about your new movie, maybe touch on your personal life a bit. Just follow my lead and we'll get through this quickly. Keanu nodded politely, though something flickered across his expression. I appreciate the opportunity, Craig. I'm here to talk about the film and the incredible work the entire cast and crew put into it. Sure, Craig waved dismissively. We'll see where the conversation takes us. The red light flashed on, and Craig's demeanor shifted into his television persona. Good morning, I'm Craig Melvin, and we're joined by actor Keanu Reeves. Keanu, thanks for being here. Good morning, Craig. Thank you for having me. So let's dive right in. Your new film has been getting mixed reviews. Some critics are calling it a vanity project. How do you respond to that? Keanu paused for a moment, clearly taken aback by the aggressive opening. Well, I wouldn't characterize it that way at all. This project brought together an incredible team of artists who poured their hearts into telling a meaningful story. The response from audiences has been overwhelmingly positive. Craig leaned forward, a slight smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. But you have to admit, Keanu, at your age, aren't you just desperately trying to stay relevant in an industry that's moved on to younger stars? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Keanu's expression remained calm, but those who knew him could see the subtle shift in his posture. I've never approached my work from a perspective of desperation, Craig. I choose projects that speak to me and that I believe will resonate with audiences. Age has never been a factor in my decision-making. Come on, though, Craig pressed, his tone becoming more confrontational. You're pushing 60. Don't you think it's time to step aside and let the next generation take over? I mean, how many more action movies can you really do before it becomes embarrassing? The studio fell silent except for the hum of the cameras. Even the crew members stopped what they were doing to focus on this unexpected turn in the interview. Keanu's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I find it interesting that you're more focused on my age than on the craft itself. Keanu replied, his voice steady but with an edge that hadn't been there before. Experience and wisdom are valuable assets in this industry, just as they are in yours, Craig. Craig chuckled, clearly enjoying the tension he was creating. Experience is one thing, but relevance is another. When was the last time you had a real box office hit without relying on nostalgia or franchise recognition? I think our definition of success might differ. Keanu responded, box office numbers are important, but they're not the only measure of a film's value or an actor's contribution to the art form. Art form? Craig scoffed. Let's be honest here, Keanu. Most of your recent work has been pretty formulaic. Same character, different setting. Aren't you just phoning it in at this point? The camera caught the moment when Keanu's diplomatic facade began to crack. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he leaned back in his chair, studying Craig with new intensity. I'm curious, Craig, Keanu said slowly. What exactly are you trying to accomplish with these questions? Because it seems like you're more interested in creating conflict than having a genuine conversation about the work. Craig's smirk widened. I'm just asking the hard questions that other interviewers are too starstruck to ask. Our viewers deserve honesty, not celebrity puff pieces. Hard questions? Keanu repeated. Or are you confusing rudeness with journalism? The tension in the studio was now palpable. Production assistants exchanged worried glances, and the show's producer could be seen frantically whispering into her headset. This was clearly not going according to anyone's plan except possibly Craig's. "Look, Keanu," Craig said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone. "I get that you're used to softball interviews where everyone treats you like some kind of saint. But this is real television. We don't coddle celebrities here just because they have a nice guy reputation." Keanu's response was measured but firm. "I've never expected to be coddled, Craig, but I also don't expect to be deliberately provoked by someone who claims to be a professional journalist. There's a difference between challenging questions and personal attacks." Craig laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "Personal attacks? I'm just pointing out some obvious truths about your career trajectory. If you can't handle that level of scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't be doing publicity." "The scrutiny isn't the issue," Keanu replied, his voice growing colder. "The issue is your approach and your apparent need to belittle your guests to make yourself feel important." The words hit their mark. Craig's expression darkened, and the pretense of journalistic inquiry began to fall away completely. "Excuse me? I think you're forgetting who's hosting this show, Keanu. You're here as my guest, and you'll show some respect." "Respect," Keanu said quietly, "is earned, Craig, and right now, you're doing very little to earn it." The studio atmosphere had shifted dramatically from the polite, professional setting of moments before. What had started as a routine celebrity interview was rapidly becoming something much more volatile, and everyone present could sense that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Craig's face flushed red at Keanu's comment about respect being earned. The host leaned forward aggressively, abandoning any pretense of professional conduct. "You know what, Keanu? I've been doing this job for over 15 years. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, and real newsmakers. I don't need some aging action star lecturing me about respect." Keanu remained perfectly still, his voice calm but ice cold. "And yet, here you are, using your platform to attack rather than inform. 15 years of experience, and this is what you've learned? To tear people down instead of having meaningful conversations?" "Meaningful conversations?" Craig scoffed, his voice rising. "What's meaningful about promoting another generic shoot-them-up movie? You come in here expecting me to ask about your process and your inspiration like you're some kind of artist. But let's be real, you're just another actor cashing checks." The camera operators exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut away. The producer was now standing just off camera, making frantic gestures to try to regain control of the situation. "You seem to have a very narrow view of what constitutes art, Craig," Keanu replied, "and an even narrower view of what constitutes professional behavior. I came here in good faith to discuss a project that dozens of talented people worked on for months. Your decision to turn this into some kind of personal attack says more about you than it does about me." Craig's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Good faith? Please. You actors are all the same. You show up, deliver your rehearsed talking points, collect your publicity, and leave. Don't pretend this is anything more than a business transaction." "If that's truly what you believe," Keanu said slowly, "then why did you become a journalist? If you think every interview is just a hollow exchange, what's the point of what you do?" The question clearly struck a nerve. Craig's jaw clenched, and he leaned back in his chair, studying Keanu with undisguised hostility. "The point is to cut through the nonsense and get to the truth. Something you Hollywood types seem allergic to." "And what truth is that exactly?" Keanu pressed. "That you can bully someone on live television? That you can use your position to make your guests uncomfortable for your own entertainment? Because if that's your version of truth, Craig, it's pretty pathetic." The word pathetic hung in the air like a thunderclap. Several crew members actually stopped what they were doing to stare at the unfolding confrontation. Craig's face went from red to nearly purple. "Did you just call me pathetic?" Craig's voice was low and dangerous. "On my own show?" Keanu's response was measured and deliberate. "I called your behavior pathetic, Craig. There's a difference, though I'm beginning to wonder if you can see it." Craig shot up from his chair, the sudden movement causing his microphone to scrape against his shirt, creating a harsh feedback noise. "That's it. You know what, Keanu? You can take your holier-than-thou attitude and get out of my studio. This interview is over." But Keanu remained seated, completely unfazed by Craig's outburst. "Actually, Craig, I don't think it is over. See, you started something here, and I think we should finish it. You wanted truth? let's talk about truth. Sit down, Craig, Keanu continued, his voice carrying a quiet authority that seemed to fill the entire studio. You wanted to have this conversation, so let's have it. Craig hesitated, clearly caught off guard by Keanu's refusal to be intimidated. The host looked around the studio, suddenly aware that every eye was on him, waiting to see what he would do next. You don't get to tell me what to do in my own studio, Craig said, but his voice lacked the conviction it had carried moments before. I'm not telling you what to do, Keanu replied calmly. I'm suggesting that if you want to act like a professional, you should probably sit down and conduct yourself like one. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to continue this tantrum in front of your crew and your viewers. The word tantrum hit Craig like a physical blow. He could feel the eyes of his production team on him, could sense their discomfort and embarrassment on his behalf. Slowly, reluctantly, he sank back into his chair. Fine, Craig said through gritted teeth. Let's finish this conversation, but don't think for a second that I'm going to let you turn this around on me. I'm not trying to turn anything around, Craig, Keanu said. I'm simply responding to the energy you brought into this room. You came in here with an agenda, and now you're upset that I'm not playing along with it. My agenda, Craig spat, is to ask real questions instead of lobbing softballs. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Real questions? Keanu repeated. Craig, you haven't asked me a single real question since we started. You've made accusations, you've insulted my work, you've questioned my relevance, and you've been dismissive and rude. But you haven't asked me anything that would give your viewers actual insight into the film or the process of making it. Craig opened his mouth to respond, but Keanu continued before he could speak. A real question might be about the themes we explored in the film, or the challenges of the production, or what drew me to the story. A real question might be about working with the other actors, or how this project fits into the larger body of work I've been building over the years. But instead, you chose to make this about age and relevance and box office numbers, as if those are the only metrics that matter. The studio had fallen completely silent, except for the hum of the cameras and the barely audible whispers of the production team trying to figure out how to handle this unprecedented situation. Craig's face was a mask of barely controlled rage. Don't lecture me about journalism, Keanu. You're an actor. You pretend to be other people for a living. You don't get to come in here and tell me how to do my job. You're right, Keanu said with a slight nod. I am an actor, but I'm also a human being who deserves basic respect, regardless of my profession. And right now, you're failing to show that respect, not just to me, but to your viewers, your crew, and yourself. Craig's hands were visibly shaking now. Whether from anger or embarrassment, it was impossible to tell. Basic respect? You want to talk about respect? How about showing some respect for the fact that I'm trying to do my job here? What job is that exactly? Keanu asked quietly, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're more interested in creating drama than informing your audience. Is that really what journalism means to you? The question hit its mark with surgical precision. Craig's entire demeanor shifted, his aggressive posture deflating slightly as he struggled to maintain his composure in front of the cameras that were still rolling. Craig sat in stunned silence for several seconds, the weight of Keanu's question hanging over him like a storm cloud. When he finally spoke, his voice was strained and defensive. You think you're so clever, don't you? Coming in here and trying to psychoanalyze me on my own show. This is exactly the kind of Hollywood arrogance I was talking about. Keanu shook his head slowly. This isn't arrogance, Craig. This is disappointment. I came here expecting to meet a professional, and instead I found someone who seems to get his kicks from making his guests uncomfortable. That's not journalism. That's just cruelty. Cruelty? Craig's voice cracked slightly on the word. I'm doing my job. I'm asking the questions that need to be asked. No, Craig, Keanu said firmly. You're hiding behind your job to justify behavior that you know is wrong. There's a difference between tough questions and personal attacks. And you crossed that line the moment you started talking about my age and trying to humiliate me on television. The production crew was frozen in place, unsure whether to intervene or continue recording what was clearly becoming a career-defining moment for both men. The producer had given up trying to signal from the sidelines and was simply watching in horrified fascination. Craig tried to regain his footing. Look, if you can't handle a little heat, maybe you should stick to those puff-piece interviews where everyone kisses your feet. This is real television, not some promotional playground. Real television? Keanu's voice carried a note of genuine incredulity. "Craig, what we're doing right now, this is real television. This is what happens when someone finally calls you out for your unprofessional behavior. And judging by how you're handling it, I'm guessing this doesn't happen very often." Craig's face contorted with rage. "You don't know anything about me or what I've accomplished. I've broken major stories. I've held powerful people accountable. I've made a difference with my work. Then why are you wasting that talent trying to tear down someone who came here to talk about their art?" Keanu asked. "If you're really the journalist you claim to be, why aren't you asking questions that serve your audience instead of feeding your own ego?" The words hit Craig like physical blows. He opened and closed his mouth several times, struggling to find a response that wouldn't make him look even worse than he already did. "My ego?" Craig finally managed. "This coming from someone who's made a career out of playing the same character over and over again? You want to talk about ego?" Keanu leaned forward slightly, his voice remaining calm but gaining intensity. "Craig, you're on national television right now, making a fool of yourself in front of your viewers, your colleagues, and your crew. And instead of recognizing that and trying to salvage some dignity, you're doubling down on behavior that everyone in this room knows is wrong. If that's not ego, I don't know what is." The silence that followed was deafening. Craig looked around the studio, suddenly seeming to realize that every person present was watching him with a mixture of embarrassment and pity. The cameramen were still filming, the producers were still listening, and his reputation was crumbling in real time. "You know what?" Craig said, his voice now shaking with barely controlled fury. "I don't have to sit here and take this from some washed-up actor who thinks he's better than everyone else." "Washed up?" Keanu repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Craig, 5 minutes ago you were criticizing me for still making movies at my age. Now I'm washed up? Which is it? Because it sounds like you're just throwing out insults and hoping something sticks." Craig stood up again, this time more deliberately. "This interview is over. Security, please escort Mr. Reeves from the building." But Keanu remained seated, completely unmoved by the threat. "Actually, Craig, I think your viewers deserve to see how this ends. You started this confrontation, you've embarrassed yourself in your show, and now you want to have me thrown out rather than face the consequences of your own behavior." "I'm the host here," Craig said, his voice rising to nearly a shout. "This is my show, my studio, my rules." "And this is your reputation," Keanu replied quietly, "which you're destroying with every word that comes out of your mouth." Craig looked desperately toward the production booth, clearly hoping someone would cut the cameras or go to commercial, but the crew seemed transfixed by the unfolding drama, and no one moved to intervene. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" Craig said, his voice now a mixture of desperation and venom. "You think because people like your movies, you can come in here and disrespect me in front of my own team?" Keanu's response was delivered with devastating calm. "Craig, I haven't disrespected you. I've simply refused to let you disrespect me. There's a big difference, and the fact that you can't see it is exactly the problem." Craig's composure finally shattered completely. "Get out," he screamed, pointing toward the studio exit. "Get out of my studio right now." Keanu stood slowly, his movements deliberate and dignified. "I'll leave, Craig, but not because you're telling me to. I'll leave because this conversation has run its course, and frankly, I have better things to do than watch you embarrass yourself further." As Keanu began to walk toward the studio exit, Craig called after him, his voice cracking with emotion. "Don't you dare walk away from me. We're not finished here." Keanu paused at the edge of the set and turned back to face Craig one final time. "Actually, Craig, we are finished. And so, I suspect, are you." The words hung in the air like a prophecy as Keanu walked calmly out of the studio, leaving Craig standing alone in front of the cameras, his chest heaving with rage and humiliation. The crew remained frozen in place, unsure of what to do or say in the aftermath of what they had just witnessed. Craig looked around the silent studio, suddenly seeming to realize the magnitude of what had just happened. His show, his reputation, his career, all of it had been laid bare in front of the cameras by someone who had simply refused to be bullied. The red recording light continued to blink, capturing every moment of Craig's mortification as he stood there, defeated and exposed, with nowhere left to hide. That's the story of how Keanu Reeves dismantled a television host who thought he could push around one of Hollywood's most respected actors. Craig Melvin learned the hard way that respect isn't something you can demand, it's something you have to earn. And when you abuse your position to attack your guests, sometimes those guests fight back in ways you never expected. What do you think? Did Craig get what he deserved? Or did Keanu go too far?